Is a more engaged Kristaps Porzingis a more inefficient one? And what do you think about the Mavs Leadership Council? This is the Gray Area right here on Kevin Gray Sports. My name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there. For all things Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube, you can catch me on your home of the Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers. 105.3 The Fan. The Dallas Mavericks are 2-1 as they get ready to take on the San Antonio Spurs before they go on the road to take on the Denver Nuggets and then come back home to take on the Sacramento Kings and the Miami Heat. The Dallas Mavericks getting a road win against the Toronto Raptors and then coming home to defeat the Houston Rockets in a hard-fought win and a record-setting win in the fact that the Jason Kidd-led Dallas Mavericks played 15 players, the first time in NBA history that an NBA team played 15 players in a game. At least all 15 players got at least 3 minutes in the ball game. Even Moses Brown got into the act where he played for 3 minutes, had 3 points and a couple of blocks. But it was the discussion about the Mavs Leadership Council after the game against the Rockets that had everybody talking. This Leadership Council consisting of Luka Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Kristaps Porzingis, who I'll get to here in just a moment. They all came together with Jason Kidd and said, hey, we think it's a good idea that we get everybody involved in this game against the Houston Rockets. Now, I'll say this about the Leadership Council and what they decided on playing the 15 players. That's not necessarily something that will happen going forward here. While it was a cool idea to show that there was input from the team's leaders, more importantly, that communication between head coach and said players continues to grow and get better, it also speaks to the chemistry that this team is trying to develop by making sure that everyone is taking ownership and accountability in the process. By getting all 15 players involved, each one of them feel like they have a hand in how the Mavericks will continue to look going forward and what the shape of this team will look like. And ultimately, that's a good thing. Communication in any relationship, especially a new one between coach and player, in this case with the Dallas Mavericks, with Jason Kidd and his new players that he's coaching, that's not a bad thing at all. And in fact, something that should be encouraged going forward. In fact, here's Jason Kidd talking about how the Leadership Council came together and what it means and how it will be used going forward. Here's Jason Kidd.
Can you tell us more about this council? Who's on it? Is it something you've done before with other teams?
Yeah, we'll let the council stay the council. It's a communication thing, and talking to those three guys, before they wanted to do it, and so it's a cool thing because we always talk about 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 as part of the team, and they tend not to get to play, but they come to work every day just like the starters or the rotation guys. And I think this just shows what kind of character, what kind of guys we have in that locker room, which is really, really cool.
So Jason Kidd saying, look, accountability and chemistry is something that this team has talked about throughout the offseason and into this season. How that will translate into wins and losses on the floor continues to remain to be seen, but being off to a 2-1 start as they get ready to take on the Spurs, then the Nuggets, then as I mentioned, the Sacramento Kings and the Miami Heat, you're starting to see why things may have changed from a head coaching perspective. Because it wasn't necessarily the fact that Rick Carlisle, from a schematics perspective, was doing necessarily things that were bad for this team, but it was really time for a new voice, a player's coach who could understand the pulse and the mind of a player, a modern-day player that is, because I know Rick Carlisle used to be a player himself, but Jason Kidd, obviously a more modern player who could connect to today's NBA player much better than Rick Carlisle ever could. Maybe it was time for that new voice to be heard. And with his learnings from the Los Angeles Lakers, Jason Kidd seems like a guy who is, at least on its surface, becoming better in terms of a communicator and a listener, which he has talked about things that he had to improve on when he became a head coach again in the NBA. Now, for Jason Kidd, it looks like getting better in terms of a communicator and a listener. The things that he's experimenting with, especially with Kristaps Porzingis right now, yeah, that's not necessarily working. Coming into the game against the Houston Rockets, Kristaps Porzingis in his first 2 games was 11 of 33 from the field. He didn't do much better, going 2 of 10 from the field before leaving in the third quarter with 6:24 left due to back tightness. Questionable going into the game against the San Antonio Spurs. We will see what his availability continues to look like going forward in games against the Nuggets, the Kings, and the Miami Heat. But for all the things that Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis were last year in terms of their efficiency as far as the most efficient pick and roll duo in all of the NBA, things haven't gone quite as well so far this season. In fact, according to NBA statistics, going into the Rockets game, the Mavericks had scored 70 points on 94 possessions with both Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis on the floor together. But 83 points in 63 possessions, that's an average of 132 points per 100 possessions, with Doncic on the floor and Kristaps Porzingis off of it. Obviously, it's a small sample size, and you saw how things didn't get much better for Porzingis in the Houston Rocket game before ultimately he left with the back tightness. But here's what my observation has been so far watching Kristaps Porzingis. While, yes, he is much more engaged, especially on the defensive end, where you've seen him already have multiple blocks in multiple games so far this year, offensively, it continues to look rather ugly. I don't know what this off the dribble KP taking more dribbles, trying to create step backs, trying to create off the dribble jump shots in mid range. Seems like it's not something that's going to work continuing to going forward. Now, Porzingis used to be able to do some of those things, not necessarily great at all when he was in New York, but it looks even worse, especially with the physical limitations that he has. And here's what concerns me most. While you may see, quote-unquote, more activity from Kristaps Porzingis, how much does that ultimately preserve his body to be able to be on the floor as much as he needs to be to give this Mavericks team an opportunity to do the kind of winning that they think they're capable of? Because while you like Kristaps Porzingis being engaged the way that he is, the way that he's going about his efficiency right now is not good at all. You saw how inefficient he looked in trying to create those off-the-dribble jump shots by taking step backs and trying to take mid-range jump shots by trying to take guys off the dribble. In fact, at one point during the Rockets game, Kristaps Porzingis passed up a wide-open three-pointer to try to take his man off the dribble and subsequently missed a mid-range jump shot. That is the kind of inefficiency that the Mavericks can't necessarily afford. And a team that's already struggling to make shots where they shot a paltry 28% from the three-point line against the Houston Rockets, they can't afford to take the kind of inefficient shots and, more importantly, have Porzingis taking the kind of inefficient shots that he's been taking so far. You saw in the Atlanta Hawks game where guys like John Collins and others were able to get physical with Kristaps Porzingis when he got down into the post. So right now, this KP Back to the Future New York Knick type of Porzingis that we've been seeing so far hasn't necessarily worked. Now, again, a small sample size, and more importantly, can Kristaps Porzingis remain healthy to be on the floor so that we can get a larger sample size of what he could look like going forward? But if he is back to what he was defensively, that's a good thing, especially when you saw him be able to move much better on the defensive end. Now it's about translating that movement onto the offensive end, but more so about Jason Kidd putting him in better positions to succeed and accentuating Kristaps Porzingis' strengths. One thing that Rick Carlisle was able to do was to discover that Porzingis can stretch the floor from the three-point line and do so in a historic way for a guy that's 7'3" that can shoot the ball as well as he can from the three-point line. His movements on the offensive end don't lend itself to a guy that can be taking guys off the dribble and, more importantly, try to create jump shots off the dribble. That's not something that he's good at or really has ever been good at. So why, at this particular point, with the injury history that he's had, do the Mavericks think that this is a good idea? Right now, it hasn't been a good idea, and it's looked rather ugly so far. Defensively, you've been much better if you're the Mavericks against the Raptors in the second half, and again against the Houston Rockets in the second half there, where they held them to just 46 points total in the second half and being able to start the third quarter on a 13-0 run to really get themselves back in it and never really look back from there. But the Mavericks have to get better when it comes to shooting the basketball from the three-point line, getting a more efficient Kristaps Porzingis, and playing a consistent 4 quarters of basketball that allows him to be more consistent throughout games, especially on the defensive end. Not getting off to slow starts defensively and trying to catch yourself up in terms of winning basketball games. That can't happen when you're trying to be a top 4 team in the Western Conference when you got the teams like the Suns and the Jazz and others that are competing right now. Notice I didn't mention the Lakers because they got a mess going on out in Tinseltown. But this is more about Jason Kidd's ability to rediscover Kristaps Porzingis in a more efficient way, and more importantly, to get his team to make jump shots much more consistently. And give credit to Reggie Bullock. 16 points in 17 minutes really made his presence felt on both ends of the floor, taking the defensive assignment against guys like Eric Gordon and others, but more importantly on the offensive end, allowing the defensive energy to translate into offense and you hope that continues to move forward for him as the Mavericks continue their schedule. We will see how this rotation continues to get built out. I know folks are going to jump on these comments and say, hey, more Moses Brown, more of other guys, because we want to see them get on the floor, especially with Reggie Bullock getting paid the kind of money that he is. He should be on the floor a lot more than just the 17 minutes that he's seen against the Houston Rockets. I tend to agree with you, especially on the Reggie Bullock part. But we'll see. For the Dallas Mavericks, though, this is an opportunity at 2-1 to continue to build on what they've done so far, play 4 consistent quarters of defensive basketball. If Porzingis can remain healthy and get back on the floor, finding a more efficient KP to be able to accentuate his strengths as an offensive player. But then, more importantly, the Dallas Mavericks have got to knock down shots. Once they start to do that, Luka is going to continue to be Luka. You saw the performance that he had against the Houston Rockets with the 26 points and 14 rebounds and 7 assists that he had. He's going to continue to get his legs under him when it comes to shooting the basketball. But Doncic is going to drive this thing as far as the Mavericks allow him to take it. But other guys have got to step up, and you saw that especially with a guy in Dorian Finney-Smith who had 3 blocks in the game against the Rockets. Defensively, continue to get better, play more consistent 4 quarters of defense, and offensively, get more efficient, especially knocking down the 3-point shot. If they do, what's ironic is that the Mavericks have looked their best offensively when they looked a lot like when Rick Carlisle coached them. Yee. But hey, it's early on. We'll see how the Mavericks move forward. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there for all of these Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. It's been another episode of The Gray Area. I'll talk to you later. Peace.